So in your message, you pointed to the Acts church, and you talked about how that church, after Peter spreads the gospel, shares the gospel, 3,000 people come to know Jesus, and more people are added to that church on a daily basis. And you talked about how attractive that church was, and God continued to bring people to that church. But then you also talked about how, even though that church was attractive, it was just within chapters later that there were flaws within that church. So that begs the question then, even from the biblical example, can we find a perfect church? Or should we expect a perfect church?
Yeah, I don't think well, for one, you're never going to find a perfect church. I remember, and I'm sure you've heard the saying before, if you ever find a perfect church, don't join it because you'll mess it up.
Yeah.
And I just think that's true. People are people, humans are humans, and we are a flawed species, Right. So, but the reason I was pointing that out, so often we read the scriptures and we think that things were so perfect there. You read about something and you think, oh, wow, look at what God's done. But we neglect to see the flaws, or we don't realize that you turn the page, or that life has fallen apart, and then you turn the pages and things are all back to where they ought to be. But 25 years happened in that turn of the page. Right. And we don't think about that. We want this instant type of thing. So whenever I was talking about that first church, it really came down to the fact that I think a lot of people end up reading that and they think, wow, I wish that my church could be a New Testament church and be so accepting and attractive and everything else. But the truth is, they had their own problems.
They did. And I think it's amazing that you point out the idea that within a turn of a page, so much time elapses. I think we forget that when we're reading the accounts in the Bible, time is not happening in real time, or at least not happening in the time that we're reading it.
Right.
So much time goes by. So that leads me
to slug through that is difficult. That's life, right?
Right. So there has to be a level of commitment to be able to build up that church. And I think, is that what you're kind of getting at with the idea of a community? We have to be committed to each other, regardless of the imperfections that we have.
Yeah, I think it's highly important that we're committed to the God of faith, hope, and love. That we have to have our eye on who He is.
That's Jesus.
And pursuing Him.
Just so you know. Okay.
And as we pursue Him, then He makes us into the community that He wants us to be. We become the community of faith, hope, and love.
You said that they collectively had an unwavering pursuit of God. How? As an individual, I understand how I pursue God. But how would you describe a community of people? How would you describe a group of people pursuing God together? That's something I'm having a hard time imagining what that looks like.
Right, and that's a great question, and I think that it's probably the difficult part of being the church. It's a difficult part of being the community, especially in the Western world. Yeah. We are so individualistic, and we are so focused on me, what I want, and make sure that I'll show up here as long as you do what I want you to do. But the reality is that as we all, and it starts with individual pursuing Him, and then coming together, and as a group of people, again, pursuing Him and doing what it is that He's called us to do together, collectively. We're loving the unlovely. We're loving the lovable. We're doing the things that we need to do that Christ would have done, but instead of doing it individually, we're doing it together in a community.
So being truly of one heart, one mind, of one mission.
Correct.
Really. That takes a level of commitment that I think people struggle with. To be able to lay down their individualistic, the things that they want for themselves, in order to sacrifice maybe their own perceived rights, in order to benefit the collective good. But yet, I guess if we individually are seeking Christ, we see that Christ laid down His life for all of us.
Correct.
So that is a model that we have to take to heart. Man, and that is. I can see why it is supernatural at that moment, that the church should be a supernatural entity that is able to lay down their selfishness and to love each other. Because, like you said it yourself, as a Western society, we struggle, or we embrace the idea that we are individuals, that we should be able to do what we want to do.
And there's beauty in that.
There is, yeah.
There's beauty in that, and that's what makes America a place that people want to be, because you can show up here and you can be great. You can rise to a level that other people would want to aspire to. Those are good things. The problem with it is it's a lonely place. And I, here again, I'll go back to what I started with. I was lonely. Coming back into church, coming back into what it is that I feel called to do, and looking around and feeling that I don't feel like I have the relationships that I need to have. We don't do this naturally. It's a call. It's a created thing. It's what we were created for. But I don't think we run into it, at least not in Western world.
Right. That's a good word.